Our project for big data analytics is behavioral mapping. The team members are Marshall Van Loon and myself, Palash. The motivation behind this project. What we wanted to do was a behavioral analysis, simply because both of us were really disillusioned with the fact that sentiment analysis really got us nowhere. Let's say, for example, Donald Trump would give you the worst sentiment rating when you analyze Twitter feeds or Reddit comments. But he has one of the largest, bodies of supporters and loyalists following him. Hence, what we wanted to do was, instead of mining for people's opinions, we wanted to understand and group people with similar opinions. To that effect, we perform reading level analysis to determine the grade level of people who follow a particular popular figure, common traits with respect to other threads followed, and popular discussions among people who follow a particular person. Understanding the working of Apache Spark and distributed clusters is one of the main motivations of our project. Whatever we did on this project, we wanted to make sure that we utilize all the benefits of Spark and resilient distributed systems or RDDs. Now, we wanted to exploit the fact that the demographic of people who post on Reddit are new age millennials and are likely influencers, just like you and me. With social media campaigns hitting the roof, a lot of the feed is actually targeted at that demographic. We wanted to analyze threads to determine common topics of discussion. We realized that Reddit posts on an average tend to be longer than that of Twitter posts, giving us a more accurate representation of sentiment. Maintaining integrity of sentiment by using a voted classifier. We shall explain what a voted classifier is a little later in this video. We want to group people into categories and draw inferences regarding their behavioral patterns. I cannot stress this enough, but a lion's share of our efforts have gone into running these processes on a Spark cluster utilizing the benefits of an RDD. The algorithms used, one of the algorithms used is sentiment analysis algorithm. So what we did was we took raw text as input, we created features from labeled data. In this case, we considered 5,300 positive and 5,300 negative movie reviews. The movie review dataset was considered because this helps give a better reading in terms of Reddit rather than just using the Senti word dictionary. We trained different classifiers to get accuracy percent on testing data. Using these accuracy percentages, we created a voted classifier that calculates a majority vote from the ensemble of classifiers. Classifier with the most votes gets chosen, and we get the score. Second algorithm that we used was reading level analysis. This is done through the Flesch-Kincaid readability tests. These tests are basically designed to indicate how difficult reading a passage in English is to understand. There are two tests, the Flesch reading ease and the Flesch-Kincaid grade level. Although they use the same core measures, they have different weighting factors. The formula are given in this slide. Basically, the formula considers the total words, the total sentences, the total syllables upon the total words, and these are weighted differently in order to get the two different formulas. Now, this is really important. We perform grouping. One type of grouping is grouping based on content. We take the raw text, we perform sentence segmentation, we tokenize it, we perform parts of speech tagging, named entity detection, and we get the chunk tuple. In this case would be either the person or the organization most mentioned in a thread. These are also termed as top references, which would be given later in the slides. Grouping based on users. Now this is the crux of the problem. We select a subreddit, we find all the unique authors in that subreddit. For each unique author, find the other subreddits they actively participate in. We map each of the subreddits to an RDD consisting of subreddit name, 1. Now we fold this RDD by key with add to find the total post count in subreddits. This gives us, let's say I pick a particular thread of Donald Trump and we realize that most of the people who post in Donald Trump are also active in other threads such as political discussion, Sanders for president, politics, hip hop heads, etc. That's the kind of information we get when we base grouping based on users. Datasets. Reddit is our main dataset, whereas Twitter is used as a measure to test our algorithms just to see whether it's working. It's easy to create a model in Twitter. The dataset that we have collected is over 6 GB in size with over two databases, that is NoSQL, DynamoDB, and SQLite 3, both of which are hosted on Amazon S3 bucket. The data is comprehensive and is available at the following link. So, I mean, we've made it publicly available so that people could actually use this data set because it has all the fields required for you to effectively query it. The data set is essentially, we have in this data set, we have 6 million authors, 24,000 threads, 2.8 million comments, and around 2,000 subreddits. The software packages used are as follows. All the code was written in Python 2.7, distributed with a 64-bit Miniconda 2 package and environment manager. Reddit data was scraped using the Pro package for Python. SQL Alchemy and SQLite 3 were used to build the database that stores thread, comment, and user data. NLTK and TextStat were used for text analysis. Bodo 3 was used to interact with Amazon S3 and DynamoDB. All of these softwares was used with Spark 1.6.1 to handle the datasets during analysis. This is the basic system architecture, the Reddit data, and from that data we get a lot of fields, but the most important fields that we have are users, text, subreddits, time, upvotes, downvotes, score, comments, replies, and embedded media. This is a part of our data mining. It took a significant amount of time and we have collected over 6 GB of this data. All of this was hosted on an Amazon S3 in two types of databases. We initially went with a NoSQL database since both of us were comfortable with a NoSQL database. But then we soon realized that the data from the Pro package is highly structured and hence had to move to an SQLite 3 database. On our Spark cluster, we perform all the algorithms that we've described earlier, such as sentiment analysis, reading level analysis, grouping users based on users and content. How we went about doing this was we built a database on 10 test code on the laptop, which had 12 GB memory, Intel iCore i7, and then we moved to Amazon EMR with Spark with one master node, three slave nodes, T2 point micro instances, analyzed databases in DynamoDB. I've already mentioned that. These are the major challenges we faced while working on this project: loading SQL in Spark with SQL context, learning how to work with RDDs, properly distributing data across nodes. The largest challenge was learning to properly load and query SQL databases in Spark, and once the data was loaded in an RDD, executing our analysis on our data. This is not terribly difficult but took some time to learn to do properly. Once we got our code to work properly on a single node setup, it took some effort to properly set up a cluster from scratch where the data would be distributed across Spark worker nodes. This problem was solved by setting up an NFS on the same path for each node. Experimental results. The sentiment analysis is performed in Spark. As you can see, the sentiment value for the Donald is minus 0.59. For Sanders for president is minus 0.43 and Hillary Clinton is minus 0.40. The entire scale is negative. This is kind of funny because it seems like the internet is kind of attracted to posts that are largely negative. And as you can see that Kanye West has a high negative score. Hillary Clinton has the least negative score. And as we predicted, Donald Trump has like the highest negative score, which was expected. What we also tried to do in order to balance the scale was to pick uplifting news, so that we know that, hey, maybe uplifting news would have like the highest, would have a positive sentiment score, but that was not to be. Next, we went on to reading level analysis. In this, we can see that the reading level analysis, reading E score, shows us that it's easiest to read the Kanye West subreddit. This is because of the content is really easy to read. And let's face it, Kanye West followers may not have the most sophisticated English. Whereas the Clinton subreddit has the least reading E score, and that means it's the hardest to read. This is kind of correlated with the reading grade level, which is inversely proportional to the reading ease level, reading E score. As you can see, the Clinton subreddit is the hardest to read, which might lend to the discussion that maybe people on this subreddit are more evolved, educated, and tend to have a higher level of discussion rather than the people who comment on subreddits dedicated to Kanye West. Now, when we group by users, we see that the users, or rather authors, who post in the Donald Trump subreddit are also active in the subreddits of politics, Sanders for president, pics, hip hop heads, videos, political discussion, news, movies, world news, and technology. I mean, the way we have implemented this is given in the black thing there. We can see that 60% of the users who post in the Donald Trump subreddit are also active on the politics subreddit. What are the top influencers? A top influencer is someone who has the highest score in a particular subreddit. The highest score is given by the difference between the total number of upvotes and downvotes. Now we see here that the top poster in the Sanders for President subreddit is also interested and is actively posting in subreddits such as trees, world news, politics, LGBT. This goes to show the fact that this person is actually interested and his interests are really closely aligned with Bernie Sanders' campaign rhetoric. When we talk about group by content, we figure out the most commonly used words in a thread of comments. So, in the Donald Trump subreddit, as you can see, the most commonly used words is Hillary Clinton, white, Clinton, male, some expletives which we're not going to say here, but I mean, it gives you an idea of what people on that thread are talking about. Now, coming to our inferences, what do we see? When we compare the top references of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, we notice that based on the content in a given thread, the top references in the Donald subreddit are Hillary Clinton, whereas the Sanders for President top references are made to Bernie Sanders. This is how it should be, right? Which leads us to believe that people on the Donald Trump subreddit are posting negatively about Hillary Clinton, while people on the Sanders for President are actually talking about Bernie Sanders. Top references for Sanders for President are also made to referring to Wall Street. Wall Street is a common topic in his rhetoric. When we look at the inferences and we group by users, we see grouping based on user activity outside the Bernie Sanders and the Donald subreddit, we come across a couple of interesting observations. Users in both are avid commentators on threads related to politics, which is to be expected, right? This is more of a political threads. However, there is a higher percentage of users posting in the political discussion subreddit for Bernie Sanders, or rather from the Bernie Sanders subreddit, probably lending to a more evolved discussion. I mean, there is a more evolved discussion that is happening among users who post in Sanders for President as opposed to what is happening in the subreddit for the Donald. Users in both are also subscribed to the subreddit Hip Hop Heads. I would like to point this out, and in the next slide, we will be able to see the impact of endorsement for Kanye West. Users posting on the Bernie Sanders subreddit are also commenting on the atheism subreddit, as Bernie Sanders is known not to be as religious. Continuing from the last slide, we see in this, users in the Hillary Clinton subreddit seem to be more likely to post negatively about Bernie Sanders on subreddits dedicated to negative content towards Bernie Sanders. Since you can see, Sanders for President is the second most active subreddit for users of the Clinton subreddit. Confirming our reading grade level analysis as the most educated, there are a lot more people who comment on the political discussion for Clinton subreddit. I mean, we had figured out the fact that the reading level or the reading grade level is highest for people who post in the Hillary Clinton subreddit. And these are the people who also post on political discussion, and hence a more evolved discussion would take place there. Now, an insignificant amount of Redditors on the Hillary Clinton subreddit are commenting on the Hip Hop Head subreddit. Whereas on the Kanye West subreddit, a majority of the users are actively commenting on the Hip Hop Heads subreddit and thus likely to comment on subreddits dedicated to Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, like we noticed from the earlier slide. This is a noticeable surprising social interaction with regard to Hip Hop Head subreddit, which gives us an indication of people being influenced strongly by the subreddits they are a part of. We believe that this is indeed an interesting and innovative analogy. We're not sure if anyone's ever done this before. The top influencer. Now, we've already explained what a top influencer is. In this case, the top influencer on the Sanders for President subreddit also posts on other subreddits related to marijuana, world news, LGBT topics, and politics. I mean, this is really closely aligned to Sanders' election rhetoric, which leads me to believe that this guy is an actual real guy, a real person. Whereas the top influencer on the Donald subreddit only posts on the Donald subreddit. This appears to be a Reddit account created for the purpose of creating content for the Donald, our theme towards. Thank you. We shall now move on to the video demo of our project.
Hi everybody, I'm Marshall and I'm going to be walking you through a quick demonstration of our code that we wrote for our final project. Right here in front of me is the script that we wrote to determine the reading ease of all comments for particular subreddits. Um, Here you can see I've hard coded in the path to our database here, and it will be combined down here with our database engine later on when we actually open up the database. Here you can see us importing the tools that we're going to need in order to actually analyze all of the text, and then we wrap the functions that we use to analyze the text in this function here that helps us reject some bad inputs. And what will happen is we'll try to analyze the text here, and if that fails, it'll return a -1, which will be filtered out later in the code. This is just more simple error checking, and this right here will constrain our outputs to valid values. More just simple error checking. Here we define our Spark context, which you need to do for each individual standalone script that you hope to submit through Spark context. And down here we actually will start to get to the meat of our script. Here you can see us loading using the Java Database Connectivity API, which I have saved on my computer, our database, and I'm loading the threads and the comments table, which I'm saving to their own individual variables and registering them as their own unique tables. Once we have the entire threads and comments loaded, we section off a particular subreddit. So for the first set of analysis, we're using the Donald, where we query the entire table. We'll select everything from all threads where the subreddit associated with the thread is equal to the Donald. And then we'll register a new temporary table consisting of just these threads in the Donald. So then, using our selected threads from the Donald, we'll query the comments table where we'll select the body from the comments, and we'll do an inner join on the subthreads where the subthread ID for the ID for each thread in the ID for each thread where the subreddit is a Donald is equal to the comments thread ID, which is a column in each comments entry. And we're going to filter our comments that we're going to analyze to they must have over 100 upvotes. And this is really to speed up our analysis, but also it gives you better, more popular comments to analyze versus just trash that people write and no one pays attention to. And then once we have all of these bodies, we're going to register it as an RDD. We use a map function to actually perform the analysis on each individual entry in the RDD, where it will return a new RDD variable, scores, And then here is where we'll actually do the filtering to where each score entry must be greater than 0. So that's where the return -1 from our previous function comes into play. And then I calculate the mean of the entire single column RDD. And I do this for the Donald, which is the Donald Trump subreddit, Sanders for President, which is the Bernie Sanders subreddit, Hillary Clinton, and just for the heck of it, Kanye West. So we'll go over here and actually kick that off. I've added Spark Submit to my path in my bash RC file, and I have specified the class path to my SQLite, the Java file that handles the SQLite database. This is a pretty simple way to submit this because I'm doing it on a standalone setup on my laptop. Submitting it to a cluster requires a few more options that I've specified in my README file along with my code. And this will just take a minute to go. I'll hang tight and see what it looks like. Okay, we'll come back to this, but you can see that it's running right here, going through separate stages. Now, here we have the code that performs our chunking analysis. This is where we pull out the most used proper nouns for a particular subreddit, and a lot of it is very similar to the previous example. Like we have another function that we use to wrap our analysis tools in to help handle simple errors. Here we're using the natural language toolkit, and as before, we define threads and comments data frames, we load temporary tables, and then we select specific subreddits, again using the same subreddits: Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and Kanye West. Again, select all threads from this particular subreddit, and then select the comment bodies for the threads for this particular subreddit, and we again filter out to make sure everything has at least 100 upvotes and convert it to an RDD. Now we create a tuple here using the map function, where we take the analyzed chunks and the number 1, and we turn these into a flat map. So this actually returns a list, and then we flatten that list into singular tuples in the RDD, and then we do an analysis where we fold by key using the add, and this is our default null operator for add. And we collect the entire data set and reverse it because it comes back in lowest first order, and that's not what we want to look at. So now here we'll just print out the top 20 proper nouns in the Donald right here. And it's important to note that none of this is actually calculated until you actually go to retrieve the values, which would be here, because the RDDs are lazy operators. So that was kind of tricky when it came to debugging certain problems. So let's see if our other analysis is done. Yep, here we go. So now we have the reading ease score for all of our subreddits that we wanted to analyze. Now we'll kick off the code to do the chunking. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V. And we do chunking demo. Uh-oh. I have to do source, activate, big data, which is my virtual environment that contains all of my modules, so I don't ruin my system Python. And error. I forgot to update the actual path to my database file in that script, so let's try it again. I've updated it to where it actually is on my machine. Takes a minute to kick off, but there we go. See, now we can see what is actually going on my machine. Now you can see where the entire database has been loaded in, and you can see that it successfully kicked off multiple processes using all 4 cores on my machine locally. Still going on. But here's what to our computer Spark looks like in the sense it's eating up most of the memory on my machine actually. So now here are the top 20 proper nouns in the Donald, and it'll repeat the same analysis for each of the subreddits that we've decided to analyze. So while this is going, check out the next one. Again, a lot of this is the same up to this point where we load comments and threads, analyze a particular subreddit. This is the sentiment analysis that actually uses the voted classifier that we have defined in this file here. So open sentiment.py. Here we have defined a number of classifiers and saved them and pickled them. And the hope with pickling them is every time I run this code, we're not going to have to regenerate all of these. This takes several minutes on this machine. So hopefully we do it once, pickles them, only got to do it once again. Again, using the same techniques as before, section off one subreddit, get the threads, get the comments to those threads, filter out. This is just a quick and dirty way to filter out links, posts that just consist of links, and there's a lot of those. And we analyze, return as an RDD, and print the mean sentiment value. I'm actually on the verge of running out of hard drive space on this machine, so I'm going to just kick this off very quickly, let you take a look, see that it's running, and I doubt I'm going to be able to actually record this till the end because I think I'm actually about to run out of hard drive space. Let's see. Yeah, I only got about 100 megabytes left. But notice it didn't have to calculate any of the classifiers. They were loaded from pickles, and that saved a lot of time in our analysis at this stage. Alright, now I'm just showing you the result here. You can see from the clock when I paused it and when I started back up again, quite some time it has passed. This analysis definitely took longer than all of the other analysis, probably all the other analyses combined.